Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome to my live edit of my floral cupcakes. Now, if you're wondering what that means, it basically means that if I go live and I do a tutorial, then I render down the footage so that the audio is a lot more clear and it's a lot more shortened as well. Now, in my live footage, I did show you guys how to make my Italian meringue buttercream from start to finish. I chose not to include that in this particular tutorial, so if you do want to check out the live version, you can go ahead and see that right now in the right-hand corner. Also, as always, the quality is going to be a little bit grainier on this type of footage because it's just being done from my phone. It also uploads in a very low quality, but at the end, there's going to be some beautiful 4K beauty shots, so make sure you stick around for that. So in this tutorial, I basically use 3 different types of tips. The first 2 tips that I use are just kind of standard petal tips, and don't worry, I will put those down in the description box below so you know exactly which tips I'm using. This first one here is one of those tapered tips where the bottom is a little bit larger and the top is smaller. I always make sure to have the top portion of that petal tip pointing towards the sky and the thicker portion pointed towards the cupcake. Now, in all honesty, I'm using the same methodology for all of the different types of flowers that I'm going to show you today. I think I do a classic rose and I also do some peonies as well, but it's basically the same thing. You create that center portion, and after that, it's really simple. You're creating little rainbow arcs and you're dotting it all the way around. And the key here is to make sure that you're overlapping in a manner that looks pleasing to you. So this petal tip is a little bit different. It curves inward, so I'm making sure that that curve is also facing inward. This makes a closed peony look. And when you're doing this, the only difference between this and the other flower that I just showed you is I'm not arcing it too much. It's more like I'm keeping it kind of flat and then I'm brushing it towards myself. The frequency and where I lay the petals, though, is relatively the same. But like I said, I'm just not arcing it, so it stays kind of flat. And you'll notice that from the side view of this, it's quite short, whereas my rose was a little bit taller. Now, if you've been an avid watcher of my videos, then you'll notice that I very rarely like to use the flower nail and then place them onto the cake or cupcakes. I like to do it right on there if I can. It just saves me time. But in doing so, that does mean that you really have to fill in all of those gaps, and you're not going to get that look where the flowers are protruding a lot from the cupcake. So if you do want that look, then I do suggest that you use a flower nail. I'm going to be showing you a variation of the rose here. It's pretty much the exact same technique, but again, I did those outer petals a little bit more differently, and then I'm doing kind of a closed rose shape in the middle here, and then I'm going to flare out the petals. There's lots of ways to use the same exact technique but come out with a different looking flower. That's why I really like to kind of stick to 1 or 2 petal tips. You'll also notice that I'm using a lot of couplers on my piping bags. Now, if you're just a beginner, you might wonder, yeah, how come some people use them and some people don't? Well, I always use them now just in case I get a clog, then I can easily rectify the situation. This also allows you to switch petal tips on and off really easily, or whatever tips that you would rather use. If you need to switch to a writing tip or if you need to switch to a star tip, it makes things easy. The only downside is if you want to use a bigger tip, then you are going to have to just use a whole new piping bag. Now, when I first started creating flowers, one thing is I sometimes didn't like the way that it looked, even if I did things the right way. This is because a lot of the time I didn't like the color palettes that I chose. So it's really important that you think of color palettes that is going to be pleasing to you. I placed those cupcakes in the fridge a little bit because it was seriously hot when I was creating these cupcakes, so I wanted them to solidify a little bit more before adding on these little leaves. And to add these on was really easy. I'm not even using a specific petal tip here. All I did was I took my piping bag and I cut a little V in there, and then I put that moss green color in, which, by the way, is mixed in with a little bit of pink. I find that this really makes things more realistic on your flower. Now I'm taking all of my leftover pink and purple and white buttercream, and these are supposed to be grad cupcakes, so I thought I would do just a classic swoop. This is a very large open star tip. I've actually changed my ways of decorating cupcakes. I used to always go for the classic 1M, and then I would swoop it up several times. Now I like to use this very large tip because I find I only have to go one way around, and it really provides a nice even amount of frosting. I found the other way that I did it was just almost too much frosting. This is the perfect amount in every bite. Now I'm adding on some sprinkles, and I always like to go with a chunkier sprinkle whenever I'm doing this on cupcakes. All the sanding sugars and things like that I tend to save for things like royal icing cookies. And speaking of royal icing, remember that video where I made these? Yes, they are finally useful, and I did not know that I would have a use for them so quickly. But this is what I do with my royal icing leftovers, and if you want to see how I made these, you can go ahead and check that out in the right-hand corner. But see how it just brings everything together, and it's such a nice and quick element. So these were for a graduation, so I decided to make half a little bit more intricate with the garden flowers and then half with a little bit more of that glam element because those are going to have flags put into them. But I wanted to add those royal icing flowers to kind of bring everything together. And my friend actually brought me her own packaging, and these clamshell boxes were perfect. They really helped protect those cupcakes. Now let's get into the pricing. Now guys, I have to preface this by saying that not all pricing around the world is going to be universal. Everybody's pricing is going to differ. I place my pricing in videos so you guys can have kind of a benchmark of where I place my items. So it's more like you have to watch a series of my videos to kind of gauge what the pricing difference is between items, rather than looking at it as you need to price your items exactly at that price. My pricing is in Canadian dollars. I've said this before, I live in a very, very expensive province. It is very expensive to live here. Food is also expensive too. I live in a suburb where pricing is slightly cheaper, but it really is not that much different than if you go downtown. So my pricing is really just kind of middle of the road. Now to get into the specifics of this particular video and why I price the cupcakes at that price point, the reason is because most cupcakes around here run around $3 to $4 each, I would say on average, which means that most of these things require a little bit more than just a classic swoop and making things in bulk. This has about 4 different colors, which automatically drives up the price because, as we know, a classic cupcake would probably just have one color. Also, you're using a bunch of different tips. You're also using very specific techniques. Not everybody can go and just pipe a flower at home, so we just want to keep that in mind whenever we're pricing things. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!